The sound of my brother's voice, cold and final, is the first thing I remember. "Forget about the house, Amelia. It's not yours. It was never yours. You're just being sentimental." And I believed him. For a little while, I actually believed him. But that was before I found the key. Before I understood the depth of the lie. Before I realized that the person I'd trusted my entire life was a stranger wearing my brother's face. This is a story about family, about the things we inherit and the debts we are owed. It's about the quiet strength that grows in the dark and the thunder it makes when it finally breaks free. If you've ever been underestimated, ever been told to just forget about what's rightfully yours, then you understand why I had to do what I did. And if you love a story where the quiet one finally gets to speak her truth, then you're in the right place. Stay with me, because this is everything. I can still smell the pine-scented cleaner my mother used on the old oak floors of our family home. It's a smell that's woven into my DNA, a scent that meant safety, meant love, meant Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings, and the soft, worn fabric of my father's favorite armchair. That house wasn't just bricks and mortar to me. It was the living, breathing heart of our family. It was where I learned to walk, where I had my first kiss on the porch swing, where I held my mother's hand as she took her last, ragged breath. It was my anchor in a world that often felt too chaotic and loud, and my brother, David was my hero. He was 8 years older, with this golden boy confidence that made everyone look up to him. He'd let me tag along with his friends sometimes, lifting me onto the handlebars of his bike for a reckless, wind-whipped ride down Miller's Hill. He was the one who taught me how to throw a spiral with a football, who stood up to the kids who picked on me in 3rd grade, who smuggled me into his college dorm for a weekend and let me feel, for just a moment, cool and grown up. I worshipped him. Our dad died when I was 12, and David, even though he was just 20, immediately stepped into that role. He became the man of the house, our rock. Or so I thought. My own life had settled into a comfortable, if not exactly thrilling, rhythm. I worked as a paralegal at a small firm in Hartford, Connecticut, Halstead and Associates. I liked the work. There was a satisfying order to organizing case files, a quiet drama in the legal documents that crossed my desk. I lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city with my cat, Gatsby, and my collection of thriving houseplants. It was a peaceful life. I'd dated here and there, but no one had ever quite measured up to the memory of my father's quiet strength or my brother's infectious charm. I was, by all accounts, the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who was always there to help, to listen, to remember birthdays and anniversaries. David's life was the opposite. He was a high-flying commercial real estate developer in Boston, all sharp suits and important meetings. He drove a Porsche, vacationed in places I'd only seen in magazines, and lived in a penthouse apartment that looked more like a museum than a home. His wife, Chloe, was a perfectly curated accessory to that life. Tall, blonde, with a smile that never quite reached her ice blue eyes. She was an interior designer, and she'd always looked at our family home with a kind of thinly veiled disdain, as if she could already see the potential lurking beneath the quaint and outdated decor. We were all together for Thanksgiving. It was the first major holiday since Mom's passing 6 months earlier, and the house felt different, hollow. Her absence was a physical weight in every room, but I'd tried to make it festive. I'd spent 2 days cooking, replicating all her recipes exactly. The sage and sausage stuffing, the sweet potato casserole with the pecan brittle topping, the from-scratch cranberry sauce that was just tart enough. The table was set with her good china, the linen napkins freshly pressed. The air was thick with the warm, savory smells of turkey and roasting herbs. Sunlight streamed through the big kitchen window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. It felt like a wake. David and Chloe arrived late, of course, sweeping in on a cloud of expensive cologne and the chill of the November air. Chloe air-kissed my cheek, her eyes already scanning the room, critiquing, calculating. "The house feels so much smaller, doesn't it?" she murmured, slipping off her cashmere coat. "Without your mother's things." "It feels empty," I corrected softly, taking her coat. "Not small." David clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You did a great job with the food, Ames." Smells just like Mom's. But his eyes were distant, already looking past me, through the walls, assessing the property's value. I saw it then, just for a flash. The developer's gaze, not the son's. We ate mostly in silence, the clink of silverware on porcelain echoing loudly in the dining room. The conversation was stilted, polite. We talked about the weather, about traffic on I-84, about nothing of consequence. I could feel the ghost of my mother hovering, urging us to talk, to laugh, to be a family. It was over pie and coffee that David finally broached the subject. He cleared his throat, setting his fork down with a deliberate click. So, Amelia, Chloe and I have been talking about the house. I looked up, a flutter of hope in my chest. Maybe he felt it too, this connection, this need to preserve what was left of us. Yeah? It's a prime piece of real estate, he said, his voice taking on the smooth, persuasive tone I imagined he used in boardrooms. The market is hot right now, especially for properties in this neighborhood with this much land. We've already had a few informal inquiries. I blinked. Inquiries? David, we're not selling Mom's house. Chloe gave a light, tinkling laugh that grated on my nerves. Oh, Amelia, be realistic. What are you going to do with it? You have your little apartment in Hartford. You can't possibly maintain a place this size on your own. The property taxes alone are astronomical. I don't know yet, I said, my voice tightening. Maybe I'd live here. Maybe I'd rent it out. But we don't have to decide anything right now. Mom's only been gone 6 months. That's precisely why we need to decide now, David said, his voice losing its warmth. Sentimentality won't pay the bills. This isn't a home anymore, Amelia. It's an asset, a very valuable one. My contacts at Berkshire Hathaway think we could list it for just under $2 million. Can you imagine? $2 million! He said the number like it was a sacred incantation. I felt sick. The pumpkin pie turned to ash in my mouth. It's not an asset, David. It's our home. It's where we grew up. Where he died in his study, looking out at his rose bushes. This isn't just some lot you can flip for a profit. David's face hardened. The golden boy mask slipped, and for a terrifying second, I saw a stranger. Dad's been dead for 20 years, Amelia. Mom's gone. The past is the past. This is business. Smart business. My firm can handle the sale, we'll get top dollar, and we split the proceeds 50-50. It's clean. It's simple. 50-50? The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them. Is that what you think is fair? His eyes narrowed. What are you implying? I took a shaky breath. I'm not implying anything. I'm just saying I was the one who lived 10 minutes away. I was the one who took Mom to every doctor's appointment for the last 3 years. I was the one who sat with the hospice nurse, who held her hand, who arranged the funeral while you were closing some big deal in Singapore. Maybe fair isn't always a perfectly even split. The silence that followed was absolute. Chloe stared at me, her mouth a perfect, shocked O. David's face flushed a deep, angry red. So this is about money? He said, his voice dangerously low. After everything I've done for this family? After I supported Mom and you after Dad died? I paid for your college, Amelia? Or have you conveniently forgotten that? I haven't forgotten, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. I paid you back every penny, with interest. That was a loan, not a gift. He waved a dismissive hand. Semantics. The point is, I've carried this family on my back for 2 decades. That, even split, is more than generous. You should be thanking me. Thanking you? For wanting to sell my home out from under me? It's not your home, he snapped, his voice rising to a shout that echoed in the quiet room. He slammed his hand on the table, making the china jump. It's a house! And it belongs to both of us. And I'm not letting your childish attachment to a pile of old memories ruin a $2 million opportunity. Grow up, Amelia. The words hung in the air, cruel and final. Grow up. I felt like he'd slapped me. This wasn't my brother. This was some greedy, cold-hearted imposter. Chloe placed a placating hand on his arm. David, darling, don't get upset. Amelia just needs time to process. It's emotional for her. She turned her chilly gaze to me. You'll see, dear, it's for the best. We can use the money to buy you a lovely modern condo, something much more manageable. I looked from her condescending smile to my brother's stony, resolute face. The hope in my chest shriveled and died. I pushed my chair back from the table, my legs trembling. "I think you should go," I said, my voice barely a whisper. David stood up, throwing his napkin on the table. "Fine. We'll go. But this conversation isn't over. The house is going on the market after the new year, with or without your agreement." They left without another word. I stood in the silent, empty dining room, surrounded by the ruins of our Thanksgiving, the ghost of my family, and the chilling realization that my brother was not the man I thought he was. The first crack had appeared in the foundation of my life, and I could feel the whole world beginning to shift. The weeks after Thanksgiving were a strange, gray blur. I went through the motions at work, but my heart wasn't in it. My boss, Mr. Halstead, a kind man in his 60s with a perpetually worried expression, noticed my distraction. "Everything all right, Amelia?" he asked one afternoon, peering over his glasses at me. "You seem a million miles away." I forced a smile. "Just family stuff, sir. The holidays." He nodded sympathetically. "Ah, say no more. Families. The Lord's most challenging creation." He patted my shoulder. "It'll pass." But it didn't pass. It festered. David didn't call. No texts, no emails. The silence from him was louder than any argument. It was a punishment. He was waiting for me to cave, to call him and apologize, to see the error of my sentimental ways, and agree to his plan. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach would clench with a mixture of hope and dread. Hope that it was him offering an olive branch. Dread that it was him demanding an answer. I threw myself into cleaning the house. It was the only thing that made me feel connected to my parents, to the past, that David was so eager to erase. I started in the attic, a place thick with dust and memories. I found my old ballet recital costumes, my father's fishing tackle box, my mother's wedding dress preserved in a brittle plastic bag. And then I found the small, metal strongbox. It was tucked away in a far corner, behind a stack of my father's old accounting textbooks. It was locked, and I didn't recognize it. It wasn't one of Mom's. It was heavier, older. The lock was rusted shut. Curiosity, a welcome distraction from the ache in my heart, got the better of me. I took it downstairs to the garage, found a crowbar, and with a grunt of effort, pried the lid open. The smell of old paper and time wafted out. Inside, it wasn't full of treasure. It was a time capsule of my father's life. His old passport. A bundle of love letters tied with a ribbon, addressed to my mother in his elegant, looping handwriting. A few faded photographs of him as a young man, standing next to a car I didn't recognize. And at the very bottom, a thick, legal-sized manila envelope, gone yellow with age. My heart hammered against my ribs. I carefully undid the rusty clasp and slid the contents out onto the workbench. There were several documents. The deed to the house, my parents' marriage certificate, and their wills. My mother's was the one we'd executed after her death, leaving everything to be split evenly between David and me. But my father's his was different. I'd never seen my father's will before. He'd died when I was so young, and all of that had been handled by David and my mother. I'd never had any reason to question it. I smoothed the crinkled paper, my eyes scanning the dense, legal text. It was standard, for the most part, until I reached the subsection about the house. My breath caught in my throat. The words seemed to swim on the page before locking into devastating clarity. Asterisk. I hereby devise, give, and bequeath the property located at 217 Sycamore Lane, Hartford, Connecticut, in its entirety, to my daughter, Amelia Elizabeth Vance, to be held in a trust administered by my wife, Eleanor Marie Vance, until Amelia reaches the age of 25. It is my wish that this family home remain a sanctuary for her, a tangible reminder of my love and protection. I read it again, and a fourth time. The house was left to me, only to me, a trust, administered by Mom until I turned 25. I sat down heavily on a dusty old stool, the paper trembling in my hands. My 25th birthday had come and gone 8 years ago. A quiet dinner with friends, a cake. Mom had given me a beautiful locket that had belonged to her mother. David and Chloe had sent a generic bouquet of flowers to my office. There had been no mention of a trust, no meeting with a lawyer, no signing of documents, no handing over of a deed, nothing. My mind raced, trying to piece it together. Mom. She must have known. She was the administrator of the trust. Why had she never said anything? Why had she let me believe the house was jointly owned? Had David known? Is that why he was so desperate to sell it now? To get the money and split it? Before I ever found out, the questions swirled in my head. A toxic vortex of confusion and betrayal. I felt the world tilt on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in it, was a lie. The foundation of my life wasn't just cracked. It had been built on a fault line. I carefully gathered the documents, my hands shaking. I needed to see a lawyer, not Mr. Halstead. This was too personal, too close to home. I needed someone who specialized in probate law, in inheritance disputes. I needed to understand what this meant. But first, I needed to confront my mother's memory. I went back into the house, into the quiet living room, and I sat in her favorite chair. I could almost smell her lavender perfume. Why, Mom? I whispered into the empty room. Why didn't you tell me? The house, for the first time since her death, felt like it was listening. But it offered no answers, only more questions. And a deep, simmering anger began to replace the hurt in my heart. David hadn't just been greedy. He had been stealing from me for years, and he was going to get away with it unless I found a way to stop him. The quiet, reliable sister was about to become a problem he never saw coming. The next few days were a masterclass in suppressed panic. I went to work, I filed motions, I answered phones, all while my mind was screaming, "My brother is a thief." I felt like I had a secret burning a hole in my pocket, a live wire running under my skin. Every time my phone rang, I was terrified it would be David, that he would somehow be able to hear the accusation in my silence. I finally found a lawyer. His name was Arthur Finch, and his office was in a stately old brownstone in downtown Hartford, all dark wood and leather-bound books. He was probably in his late 70s, with a shock of white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He looked like a man who had seen every kind of family ugliness imaginable and was no longer surprised by any of it. I slid the copy of my father's will across his massive desk. My hand was still shaking. He read it slowly, carefully, his expression giving nothing away. He hummed softly a few times, made a note on a legal pad. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence. Finally, he looked up. "This is a very straightforward document, Ms. Vance," he said, his voice a dry, quiet rumble. "Your father's intentions are clear. The property was bequeathed solely to you. The trust was to be administered by your mother until you reached the age of 25, at which point the property should have been transferred directly into your name." "But it wasn't," I said, my voice tight. "My mother never said a word. My brother, he's been acting as if we're co-owners. He wants to sell the house and split the proceeds." Finch steepled his fingers. "And the probate process after your mother's death? You went through it?" "Yes. Her will left everything to be split evenly between us. The lawyer handling it, he was a friend of David's from college, Mark Stevens. His firm handled it all. I signed what they put in front of me. I was grieving. I trusted them." A faint look of distaste crossed Finch's face. "I know of Mr. Stevens. Ambitious." He let the word hang in the air, laden with unflattering meaning. "Do you have a copy of the final probate order, the deed as it currently stands?" I don't know. I think it's with all my mother's papers. I haven't gone through everything yet." "You need to find it," he said firmly. "The most likely scenario is that the existence of your father's will and this trust was overlooked during your mother's probate, whether by accident or by design." He paused, letting the implication sink in. "If the property was never properly transferred out of the trust and into your name upon your 25th birthday, and then it was improperly included in your mother's estate, we have a significant problem. Or rather," he corrected, a faint glint in his eye, "your brother has a significant problem." "What do I do?" I asked, feeling small and lost. "First, you say nothing," he instructed, his voice sharp. "To anyone. Especially not to your brother. Second, you find every document you can pertaining to the house. Your parents, wills, everything. Bring it all to me. Third, we will quietly petition the court to open your father's estate and formally administer this will. We will request a quiet title action to clear up the deed. This will not be a quiet process, Miss Vance. Once we file, your brother will be served notice. It will become a war. A war. With my brother. The word made me feel ill. Is there any other way? I asked weakly. Maybe if I just talk to him, show him the will. Ms. Vance, Finch said, not unkindly. A man who would conceal this from you, who would pressure you to sell a property he knows is not his to sell, is not operating in good faith. He will not see reason. He will see a threat. He will lawyer up, and he will fight you with everything he has. He will likely try to paint you as confused, greedy, emotionally unstable. You must be prepared for that. If you choose to proceed, you must be ready to see it through to the end. I looked down at my father's will. At his signature, a familiar, strong slash of ink at the bottom of the page. It was his last wish, his last act of protection for me. And it had been ignored, buried, stolen from. I thought of David's face at Thanksgiving, cold and dismissive. Forget about the house, Amelia. I looked back at Arthur Finch, and for the first time, I felt a sliver of steel enter my soul. I'm ready, I said, and my voice didn't shake this time. The search through my mother's papers was a descent into a new level of heartbreak. It was all there, in a filing cabinet in my father's old study. I found the probate documents from my mother's estate, and there it was, listed on Schedule A of her assets. Real property located at 217 Sycamore Lane, valued at $1.85 million, to be split equally between the heirs. My hands were ice cold as I sifted through the rest, and then I found it. A letter from David to my mother, dated about a month after my 25th birthday. My eyes scanned the page, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Mom? I've spoken with Mark Stevens about Dad's old will and the trust regarding the house. He agrees it's a messy, outdated relic. The tax implications of transferring it to Amelia now would be a nightmare for her. It makes far more sense, legally and financially, to just let it roll into your estate, and then we can handle it simply from there. It's cleaner this way. It's what's best for everyone, especially Amelia. She's not equipped to handle an asset of this size. I'll have Mark draw up the paperwork for you to sign, effectively dissolving the trust. Don't worry about a thing. I'll handle it. Love, David. I read it again, the words searing themselves into my brain. It's what's best for everyone, especially Amelia. She's not equipped. He had manipulated her. He had gone behind my back and convinced my mother, in her grief for my father, to sign away my inheritance. He had used his lawyer friend to make it seem legal, clean. He had treated me like a child, like a simpleton who couldn't be trusted with a, quote, asset of this size. The betrayal was so profound, so calculated, it took my breath away. This wasn't a recent development. This was a plan 8 years in the making. He had been waiting for Mom to die so he could finally get his hands on the full value of the house. The 50-50 split was a lie, too. He never intended for me to see a dime. He'd probably already planned to contest my share, to find some way to push me out entirely. Tears of pure, undiluted rage blurred my vision. I thought of all the times he'd patted my head, called me kiddo, told me not to worry my pretty little head about complicated things. He'd been patronizing me my entire life, all while systematically plotting to rob me. I gathered every single document, the letter, the probate papers, my father's will, and took them straight to Arthur Finch. He read David's letter, his lips pressed into a thin, grim line. This is exceptionally persuasive evidence of fraudulent intent, he said quietly. He deliberately advised your mother to act against your best interests, in direct contradiction of your father's stated wishes. He misrepresented the legal situation to her. What do we do? I asked, my voice hollow. We proceed, Finch said, a hard edge in his voice now, but we do not tip our hand. We let him believe he's won. Let him file to force the sale of the house. Let him spend his money on lawyers and court fees. Let him get comfortable in his victory. And then, when he least expects it, we show the court exactly what kind of man he is. It was a ruthless strategy. It meant months of agony, of pretending, of letting David think I was broken and defeated. But looking at my father's signature, at my brother's damning words, I knew it was the only way. The game was on. And my brother had no idea he was already playing from a losing hand. The call came a week later. I was expecting it, but hearing his voice, still sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. Amelia. David's tone was brisk, businesslike. No apology. No warmth. I'm having the paperwork drawn up to list the house. The realtor will need access next week for photos. I need you to make sure it's presentable. I closed my eyes, leaning against my kitchen counter. I had to play my part. I had to be the defeated, grieving sister. David, please, I said, letting my voice waver, injecting a note of desperate pleading. Can't we just wait a little longer? It's only been a few months. This is too fast. He sighed, a sound of profound exasperation. We've been over this. The market won't wait. My offer stands. 50-50. It's more than fair. Your offer is built on a lie, I screamed in my head. You are a thief. Out loud, I said, I need more time to say goodbye. There's nothing to say goodbye to, Amelia, he snapped. It's a building. It's wood and plaster. The memories are in your head, not in the walls. Now, are you going to be reasonable, or am I going to have to get lawyers involved? The threat was so casual, so ready on his lips. He'd been planning this for years. He'd always intended to use lawyers to bully me into compliance. I let a sob catch in my throat. It wasn't entirely faked. The pain was real. I was just channeling it for a different purpose. Please, don't do that. Don't make this ugly. Then stop being difficult, he said, his voice softening into that patronizing tone I now knew was a weapon. Look, I know you're emotional. I get it. But this is for the best. Trust me. Haven't I always taken care of you? The audacity of it took my breath away. Haven't I always taken care of you? While he was actively stealing my inheritance. I guess, I whispered. Good, that's my girl. I'll email you the listing agreement. You need to sign it. We're in this together, okay? We are not in anything together, I thought, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. You are on one side of a battlefield, and I am on the other, and you are too arrogant to even see me aiming my cannon. Okay, David, I said softly. I'll look for the email. I hung up the phone and slid down the cabinet to the floor, burying my face in my hands. The performance had exhausted me. The sheer weight of his betrayal pressed down on me, a physical force. I allowed myself 10 minutes to cry, to grieve not just for my mother, but for the brother I thought I had. The brother who had died long before my mother did, replaced by this greedy, hollow stranger. Then I wiped my tears, took a deep, shuddering breath, and called Arthur Finch. He took the bait, I said, my voice steady now, cold. He's sending the listing agreement. Excellent, Finch replied. Sign nothing. Tell him you need to have your own lawyer look it over. That will worry him. It will make him push harder, faster. It will make him reckless. So I did. When the email from David arrived, with the subject line, urgent, listing agreement, sign and return, I wrote back a simple, meek reply. David, this looks very complicated. I'm not comfortable signing something like this without having a lawyer look at it first. I'm sure you understand. His reply was immediate and furious. A phone call. What the hell is this, Amelia? What lawyer? You don't need a lawyer. Mark Stevens is a lawyer. He drew this up. It's standard. I just want to be careful, I said, using my best helpless female voice. It's a lot of money. I'd feel better. This is ridiculous. You're wasting time and money. My God, you're so... He cut himself off, but I heard the word he didn't say. Stupid. I'm sorry, I whispered. He exhaled sharply, a blast of static in my ear. Fine. If it will make you feel better, I'll have Mark call you and walk you through it. Will that satisfy your paranoia? I suppose, I said. Good. Expect his call. Mark Stevens called me an hour later. His voice was slick, condescending, oozing false patience. Amelia, David tells me you have some concerns about the listing agreement. It's really all very standard. We're just formalizing what you two agreed to. I just want to be sure I understand everything, I said, playing my part to perfection, about the split of the proceeds and everything. Of course, he said smoothly. It's all very clear. 50-50, after the realtor's commission and closing costs. It's the simplest way, the fair way. The fair way. The words were a joke. This man, who had helped David bury my father's will, had the gall to talk to me about fairness. Okay, I said, feigning reluctance. If you're sure, I'm positive. David has your best interests at heart, Amelia. He always has. The lie was so effortless for them. They'd been doing this for years. A well-rehearsed play, where they were the heroes, and I was the silly little sister who needed to be managed. I strung them along for another week, pretending to be nervous, asking pointless questions via email that made David increasingly furious. With each impatient, dismissive reply he sent, I printed it out and added it to the growing file on Arthur Finch's desk. We were building a portrait of coercion, of bullying, of a pattern of behavior designed to disempower me. Finally, David's patience snapped. I received a formal letter from Mark Stevens' firm. It was a petition to the probate court to force the sale of the property, citing my, quote, unreasonable refusal to cooperate and my emotional instability as hindrances to the execution of my mother's estate. I held the thick, expensive paper in my hands. This was it, the declaration of war. He was officially taking me to court to steal my house. I should have been terrified, heartbroken. Instead, I felt a cold, calm certainty settle over me. He had taken the bait. He had walked right into the trap. I took the letter to Finch. He read it, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was the first time I'd ever seen him smile. It was terrifying and wonderful. Perfect, he said. Just perfect. He's overplayed his hand. Now we wait. Wait, I asked. For what? For our court date, he said, his eyes glinting. He's asked for a hearing in 2 weeks to argue for the forced sale. That's when we'll file our response. That's when we'll show our cards. 2 weeks. 14 days of pretending everything was normal. 14 days of knowing a storm was coming that would shatter my family forever. I went back to the house on Sycamore Lane. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. I ran my hand over the banister my father had polished every Saturday morning. I stood in the kitchen where my mother had taught me how to make her famous chocolate chip cookies. I'm doing this for you, I whispered to their ghosts. For what you wanted, for what was right. The house was silent, but it felt like it was holding its breath. Waiting. Just like I was. The 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended animation. Life went on. I went to work. I watered my plants. I fed Gatsby. But underneath the mundane surface, I was a coil of tension, wound tighter and tighter with each passing day. I practiced my meekness in the mirror. I rehearsed my lines of defeat for the phone calls I knew were coming. David called every other day, his tone shifting from impatient to openly hostile. The hearing is next Thursday, Amelia, he barked during one call. This is your last chance to be reasonable. Sign the damn agreement, drop this childish nonsense, and we can avoid a very ugly public spectacle. I just don't think it's right, I'd whisper, laying the groundwork. It doesn't feel right. Your feelings are not relevant, he'd shout. The law is the law. My lawyer says the court will rule in my favor. You're going to lose, and you're going to look like a fool. Is that what you want? You have no idea what I want, I thought, clutching the phone so hard my hand ached. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my dark apartment, staring at the ceiling, going over every document, every piece of evidence in my mind. Arthur Finch had prepared our response. It was a masterpiece of legal precision, a motion to not only dismiss David's petition, but to recognize my father's will, to quiet the title in my name, and to open an investigation into potential fraud and elder abuse against my mother. It was a nuclear option. There would be no coming back from this. The family would be irrevocably broken. A part of me, the little girl who still idolized her big brother, mourned that loss deeply. But the woman I had become, the woman who had been betrayed and patronized and stolen from, knew there was no other path. I arrived at the courthouse early the next morning. It was a grand, imposing building, all marble and echoing corridors. I felt small and insignificant. I wore a simple, conservative navy blue dress. Finch's advice. You want to look respectable, reliable, not emotional. I saw David before he saw me. He was standing with Mark Stevens near the courtroom doors. They were both laughing, confident, relaxed. David looked like he'd already won. He was wearing a tailored, expensive-looking suit, his hair perfectly styled. He looked every inch the successful businessman. Mark Stevens was clapping him on the back like they were celebrating a deal already closed. Then David saw me. His smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure contempt. He said something to Mark, and they both turned to watch me approach. I kept my head down, my posture slumped, playing the part of the defeated, overwhelmed sister. "Amelia," David said, his voice cold. "I see you decided to show up. I hope you're ready to be embarrassed." I didn't look at him. I just nodded slightly and kept walking, finding a quiet bench a little ways down the hall to sit on. I could feel their eyes on me, and I knew they were exchanging smug, satisfied looks. Poor, silly Amelia. She never stood a chance. Arthur Finch arrived moments later, carrying a simple leather briefcase that contained the weapons that would destroy my brother's world. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod and sat down beside me. "Remember," he murmured, not looking at me. "Let me do the talking, you just sit there and look sad." The bailiff called our case. Probate Court, case number 73,492, in the matter of the estate of Eleanor Vance. David Vance, petitioner, versus Amelia Vance, respondent. We filed into the courtroom. It was smaller than I'd imagined, more utilitarian. The judge was a severe-looking woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Judge Wheeler. I'd looked her up. She had a reputation for being impatient with nonsense and fiercely protective of rightful heirs. David and Mark sat at the petitioner's table, directly in front of the judge. Finch and I sat at the respondent's table to their right. I could feel the heat of David's smug superiority radiating from him. The hearing began. Judge Wheeler looked over her glasses. "Mr. Stevens? You're petitioning the court to force the sale of the property located at 217 Sycamore Lane, is that correct?" Mark Stevens stood up, oozing confidence. "Yes, Your Honor. A simple matter, really. The property was the primary asset in the estate of Eleanor Vance. The will stipulates an equal division of assets between the two heirs, my client, David Vance, and his sister, Amelia Vance. Ms. Vance has been emotionally unable to come to terms with her mother's passing, and her refusal to cooperate with the sale is hindering the administration of the estate and costing both parties a significant amount of money. We're simply asking the court to intervene and order the sale for the benefit of both heirs." He made it sound so reasonable, so simple. Judge Wheeler turned her gaze to us. "Mr. Finch, your client opposes this?" Arthur Finch rose slowly, calmly. He adjusted his glasses. "Your Honor, with all due respect to Mr. Stevens, this is not a simple matter, and my client's opposition is not based in emotion, but in law." David let out a quiet, derisive snort. I saw him shake his head slightly. "Go on," Judge Wheeler said, her interest piqued. "The property at 217 Sycamore Lane was never rightfully a part of Eleanor Vance's estate to bequeath," Finch said, his voice clear and firm in the quiet room. A beat of silence. Mark Stevens frowned. "Your Honor, that's preposterous. The deed was held in Mrs. Vance's name at the time of her death. It was listed on the estate inventory. It was probated. It was probated based on a fundamental error," Finch continued, unruffled. "An error that may rise to the level of fraud." He opened his briefcase and withdrew a document. "I hold in my hand the last will and testament of Robert James Vance, the father of the parties in this case, executed and witnessed in 1998. Would the court like to see it?" Judge Wheeler held out her hand. "I would." The air in the room changed. David had gone very still. I didn't look at him, but I could feel the shift in his energy. The smugness was gone, replaced by a sudden, wary tension. The judge read the will, her expression unreadable. She took her time. The only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Finally, she looked up, her eyes sharp. "Mr. Stevens, were you aware of this document?" Mark's confidence was visibly cracking. "Your Honor, that's an old will. It was superseded. It's irrelevant." "It is very relevant," Judge Wheeler said, her voice like ice. "It appears to devise the property solely to the respondent, Amelia Vance, to be held in trust until her 25th birthday. She looked at me. "Ms. Vance, how old are you?" I cleared my throat, my voice small but clear. 33, Your Honor." The judge's eyes swung back to Mark Stevens. "So the trust should have been dissolved, and the property transferred 8 years ago. Why wasn't it?" Mark was flustered now. "Your Honor, I'd have to check my files. This was all handled by Mrs. Vance. I believe there were tax implications. It was decided it was cleaner to—" "Cleaner?" Finch interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. It was cleaner to ignore a legally binding will and fraudulently incorporate the asset into the mother's estate? Your Honor, we have evidence that suggests this was not an error, but a deliberate scheme, orchestrated by the petitioner David Vance, to deprive my client of her inheritance. That's when David lost it. He shot to his feet, his face a mask of fury. That is a lie! This is nonsense! She's confused! She's making this up because she's emotional and she doesn't want to sell. The judge leveled a terrifying gaze at him. Sit down, Mr. Vance. You are not to speak unless spoken to. She turned back to Finch. What evidence, Mr. Finch? Finch began to lay it out, piece by devastating piece. He entered my father's will into evidence. He entered the probate documents from my mother's estate, showing the house improperly included. And then he entered the piece de resistance, David's letter to my mother. This letter, Your Honor, from David Vance to his mother, written just after Amelia turned 25, explicitly discusses Dad's old will and the trust. He advises her that it's a messy, outdated relic and that the tax implications would be a nightmare for Amelia. He convinces her that it is best for everyone, especially Amelia, to dissolve the trust and let the property roll into her estate. He states, and I quote, she's not equipped to handle a asset of this size. Finch let the words hang in the air. The contempt in his voice as he read my brother's own words back to him was palpable. This letter proves two things, Finch continued, his voice rising now, filled with a righteous anger. First, that David Vance was fully aware of the existence and terms of his father's will. He knew the house belonged to his sister. Second, that he deliberately manipulated his aging mother, misrepresenting the legal and financial situation, to persuade her to act against my client's interests and in direct contravention of her late husband's wishes. This is a clear case of undue influence and attempted fraud. The courtroom was utterly silent. I dared a glance at David. All the color had drained from his face. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching. Mark Stevens was frantically shuffling through papers, his hands shaking, his confident facade completely shattered. Judge Wheeler's face was a thundercloud. She looked from the letter to David to me. Her expression, when it landed on me, held a flicker of something that might have been pity. Mr. Stevens? She said, her voice dangerously quiet. Do you have any explanation for this? Your Honor, I would need to consult with my client, Mark stammered. I think you've consulted enough, she snapped. She looked at David. Mr. Vance, do you have anything to say for yourself? David stood up slowly. His arrogance was gone, replaced by a stunned, bewildered fury. He pointed a shaking finger at me. She put you up to this, didn't she? This is her. She's always been jealous. She's always been a liar. She's twisting things. His voice was shrill, desperate. He sounded like a cornered animal. Judge Wheeler was not impressed. Sit down, she commanded, and he collapsed back into his chair. She turned her attention to Finch. Mr. Finch, what is it you are asking the court for? Your Honor, we move for an immediate dismissal of the petition to force a sale. Furthermore, we petition the court to formally recognize the last will and testament of Robert Vance, to issue an order quieting title to the property at 217 Sycamore Lane in the name of Amelia Vance, and to refer this matter to the District Attorney's Office for investigation into potential charges of fraud and elder abuse against David Vance. The words landed like blows. Elder abuse. The color drained completely from David's face. Chloe, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, let out a small, choked gasp. The judge didn't hesitate. The petition to force a sale is dismissed. With prejudice, she picked up her gavel. I am granting your motion to quiet title. The property is hereby recognized as the sole property of Amelia Vance. As for the other matter. She fixed a hard stare on David. I am compelled by the evidence before me to refer this to the district attorney. The court will be in touch with a schedule for further hearings on the matter of the trust and the administration of Robert Vance's estate. This court is adjourned. She slammed her gavel down. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the dead silence of the room. It was over. Just like that. I sat there, numb, unable to process the speed of it. The entire hearing had lasted less than 20 minutes. David was frozen in his seat, staring blankly at the wood of the table in front of him. Mark Stevens was whispering frantically in his ear, but David didn't seem to hear him. Arthur Finch placed a steadying hand on my arm. "It's done," he said quietly. I looked at my brother. The golden boy. The hero. The thief. His world had just exploded, and he hadn't even seen the bomb coming. The quiet, reliable, unequipped sister had just taken everything from him. He finally turned his head and looked at me. The look in his eyes was one of pure, unadulterated hatred. There was no brotherly love left, no familial bond. There was just rage, and the shocking realization that he had lost. He stood up, his movements stiff, and walked toward the door without a backward glance. Chloe scrambled after him, her face pale and shocked. I stayed seated, my legs too weak to hold me. The adrenaline was fading, leaving me trembling and empty. I had won. The house was mine. I had exposed my brother for the liar and manipulator he was. So why did it feel like I had just lost everything too? The fallout was swift and brutal. The district attorney's office opened an investigation. David hired a high-powered criminal defense attorney. The story, of course, leaked. It was too juicy not to. Successful Boston developer caught stealing inheritance from his own sister. I saw a truncated version of it in the Hartford Courant's business section. Local real estate heir accused of fraud and family dispute. The phone call started. Aunts, uncles, cousins. Some were supportive, horrified by David's actions. Others were furious with me. How could I air the family's dirty laundry like this? How could I drag my brother through the mud? Didn't I know he had a reputation to protect? A business to run? I stopped answering the phone. David was charged with fraud and attempted larceny. The elder abuse charge was harder to prove, but the fraud charge stuck. He ended up taking a plea deal to avoid jail time, a felony on his record, massive fines, and 5 years of probation. His reputation was in tatters. I heard through the grapevine that he lost several major clients. The Porsche was sold, the penthouse was listed. He never contacted me again. Not once. No apology, no explanation, nothing. The brother I had known and loved was truly, finally, gone. I moved into the house on Sycamore Lane. It felt different now. The ghosts were quieter. It was my sanctuary, just as my father had intended. I painted the rooms in colors I chose. I bought new furniture. I made it mine. It took a year for the dust to completely settle. The legal battles finally ended. The house was indisputably, legally, mine. The silence where my family used to be was deafening. One afternoon, I was in the garden, trying to resurrect my father's rose bushes. The soil was rich and dark under my fingers, the sun warm on my back. I heard a car pull into the driveway. I looked up, my heart giving a nervous lurch. It was a taxi. The passenger door opened, and an elderly woman got out. She was small and frail, leaning on a cane, but her eyes were bright and sharp. It was my Aunt Beatrice, my father's sister. I hadn't seen her in years. She lived in a retirement community in Florida. I stood up, wiping my dirty hands on my jeans. "Aunt B?" She hobbled over to the garden gate, a small smile on her wrinkled face. "Hello, Amelia. I was in town visiting a friend. I thought I'd stop by." I let her in, my mind racing. Was she here to yell at me? To plead David's case? I made us iced tea, and we sat on the porch swing, the same one where I'd had my first kiss. The silence was awkward for a moment. Then she spoke. "I heard about what happened with David," she said, her voice soft. "I'm so sorry, dear." I braced myself. "Are you?" "Of course I am," she said. "What he did was terrible, unforgivable." She took a sip of her tea. "Your father, he would have been so proud of you." Tears welled in my eyes instantly. I looked away, blinking hard. "You think so?" "I know so," she said firmly. "Robert was always worried about you. Not because he thought you were weak. Quite the opposite. He thought you had the strongest heart of any of us. But he knew you saw the best in people. Especially in David. He adored David. But he saw the ambition in him, the hunger. That's why he did what he did. He wanted to make sure you always had a place that was yours. A place where you were safe. He'd be glad you fought for it." I let the tears fall then. Quiet, cleansing tears. It was the first time since this whole nightmare began that I felt absolved. Justified. "Thank you for saying that, Aunt B." She patted my hand. "Family isn't always the people you're born to, Amelia. Sometimes it's the people you choose. And sometimes Protecting yourself from the people you're born to is the strongest family value there is. She stayed for an hour, telling me stories about my father as a young man, stories I'd never heard. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "This house is lucky to have you," she whispered. After she drove away, I sat back on the porch swing, pushing gently with my toe. The house stood solid and strong around me. My house. My sanctuary. The anger was gone. The need for revenge was satisfied. All that was left was a quiet, steady peace. I had lost a brother, but I had found myself. I had been told to forget about the house, but in fighting for it, I had remembered who I was. The past was finally, truly, the past. And my future, for the first time, was entirely my own. If you've ever been told you're not enough, that you should just be quiet and accept what you're given, I hope this story reminds you of your own strength. The truth is a powerful thing, and sometimes the quietest voice in the room is the one that holds the most power. If you're fighting your own battle, remember to dig deep, find your proof, and never, ever let them see you coming. And if you loved this story of betrayal and the quiet victory that followed, then do us a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you never miss a story of justice served. Because everyone deserves a happy ending. Thanks for listening.